I need to be honest with you about something, and I want to say up front that I'm still employed by the National Park Service. I'm still active. I still wear the uniform. I still drive the same truck down the same fire roads every morning and check the same trailheads and talk to the same day hikers who ask me where the waterfall is. I'm not on leave. I'm not in counseling. I haven't filed any kind of formal complaint or incident report beyond the ones I was already filing, the ones that got quietly reclassified and moved to a drawer I no longer have access to. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that what I'm about to describe didn't break me. It didn't send me running. I adapted. And I think that's the part that should bother you, because it's the part that bothers me when I let it. I took the job at Phelps Ridge State Park in the fall of 2021. It's a mid-sized park in the southern Appalachian region, about 14,000 acres, mostly second-growth hardwood forest, with some old hemlock stands and a handful of primitive campsites along the eastern ridge. There's a lake, man-made, built by the CCC back in the 30s. There's a small visitor center near the main entrance that's open seasonally, a maintenance yard, and 3 ranger stations spread across the park at roughly equal distances. Station 1 is near the front gate. Station 2 is at the lake. Station 3, which is where I was assigned, is at the end of a gravel road, about 9 miles in from the nearest paved surface, tucked into a hollow where the cell signal drops to nothing and the radio only works if the repeater on Kilmer Knob is functioning, which it often isn't. I was 29. I'd been working seasonal positions with the Forest Service and a couple of state agencies for about 5 years, mostly fire crew and trail maintenance, and I was tired of moving every 6 months. Phelps Ridge was offering a full-time, year-round position, GS5, permanent, benefits, a place to stop. I didn't care that it was remote. I didn't care that Station 3 was the one nobody wanted. I'd been sleeping in bunkhouses and government trailers since I was 24. A cabin with a wood stove and a real mattress sounded like a promotion. My supervisor was a man named Dale Beckham, district ranger, late 50s, the kind of guy who speaks slowly and precisely, and never once in the time I knew him raised his voice. Dale did my orientation over 2 days. He drove me around the park in his truck, showed me the trail systems, the access roads, the dam infrastructure, the utility sheds, the burn piles, the boundary markers. He introduced me to the other staff. There were 5 of us total. Dale, me, 2 maintenance guys named Garza and Pruitt, who worked out of the yard near the front gate, and a woman named Lena Mosley, who ran Station 2 and had been at the park longer than anyone, including Dale. Dale was thorough. He gave me binders, maps, radio protocols, incident report templates, a laminated card with emergency frequencies, a key ring with 11 keys, and a 40-minute walkthrough of the database system we used for logging visitor contacts, trail conditions, and wildlife observations. He explained the burn schedule, the invasive species protocol, the after-hours lockup procedure. He explained which gates got locked and when, which trails were closed seasonally, which campsites needed bear boxes serviced. He was a good supervisor in the way that mattered most out here. He told you what to do and then left you alone to do it. On the second day, near the end of the orientation, we were standing in the small office at Station 3, and Dale pointed to a cork bulletin board mounted on the wall near the front counter. It had a few things pinned to it: a map of the park, a photocopied list of emergency contacts, a faded flyer about leave no trace principles. He said, "This board is for public-facing information. If we update trail closures, post alerts, anything the public needs to see, it goes here. You'll get those materials from me or from Regional. don't post anything unofficial. I said I understood. He paused for a moment, then said, "If you ever find something posted that you didn't put up and I didn't send you, take it down and bring it to me." I waited for him to explain. He didn't. He just looked at me with an expression that I would later learn was not casual. It was measured. It was the expression of someone who had chosen exactly how much to say and was not going to say more. I nodded. He moved on to explaining the propane system for the station's heating unit, and I forgot about the bulletin board comment entirely. For the first 3 months, the job was exactly what I expected. Quiet, routine, physical. I woke up early, made coffee on the propane stove, checked the radio, drove or hiked to the trailheads in my section, cleared debris, checked signage, logged conditions, talked to the occasional backpacker. The fall color season brought moderate traffic, and I spent most of October answering the same questions about leaf peaks and trail difficulty and whether dogs were allowed on the lake trail. They were, on leash. I said it probably 200 times. The park emptied out in November. By December, I was going days without seeing another person. The maintenance guys came through once a week to service the road and check the water system. Lena radioed me most mornings from Station 2. Just a brief check-in, nothing personal. Dale called on Thursdays. The rest of the time, it was just me and the forest and the wood stove and the slow turning of short, cold days. I didn't mind it. I liked it, actually. There's a specific kind of peace that comes from being the only person in a very large place. Your senses sharpen. You hear things you'd normally miss. You notice the way light moves across a ridge in the afternoon, the way ice forms on the creek in patterns that look almost deliberate. You slow down. Your breathing slows down. Your thoughts slow down. It's meditative in a way that people who haven't experienced real isolation don't fully understand. It was in January, a Wednesday, I think, though I'm less certain of days now than I used to be, that I arrived at the Station 3 trailhead kiosk and found something that wasn't supposed to be there. The kiosk was a standard park information structure. Wooden frame, plexiglass-covered display area, about 4 feet wide by 3 feet tall. It sat at the start of the Black Rock Trail, which was the main hiking route in my section. I checked it regularly, kept the map current, posted seasonal alerts when Dale sent them. I'd been there 2 days earlier, and it had looked exactly the way I'd left it. Now there was a new sign inside the display case. It was printed on white cardstock, standard letter size, landscape orientation. The text was clean, black, formatted in a way that looked official. At the top, in bold, it read, Phelps Ridge State Park. Trail guidelines, Black Rock Trail. Below that was a numbered list of rules. I'm going to tell you what the rules said as closely as I can remember, because I read them carefully. I read them more than once. 1. Stay on the marked trail at all times. Do not follow unofficial paths or game trails, even if they appear well worn. 2. Do not hike alone after 4:30 p.m. between November and March. 3. If you hear knocking sounds from the north side of the ridge, do not stop. Continue walking at your normal pace. 4. The spur trail at mile marker 2.4 is permanently closed. Do not enter for any reason. 5. If you encounter a posted sign or marker that you do not remember seeing on a previous visit, do not read it. Continue past it without stopping. 6. Do not leave the trail to investigate sounds, lights, or movement in the forest, regardless of what you believe you have seen. 7. Report any unusual findings to the ranger station. Do not discuss them with other visitors. I stood there reading it for a long time. The first two rules were completely normal. Standard park guidance, the kind of thing you'd see at any trailhead in any state park in the country. Rule 3 was where it shifted. Knocking sounds from the north side of the ridge. That was specific. That was unusually specific for a public-facing sign, and it described something I had never heard mentioned in any briefing, any document, any conversation with Dale or anyone else. Rule 4 referenced a spur trail at mile marker 2.4 that I had walked past dozens of times. It was overgrown and unmarked, and I'd assumed it was an old logging path. I had never been told it was closed. Rule 5 was the one that made me stand still. It told visitors not to read unfamiliar signs. I was currently reading an unfamiliar sign, and Rule 6 was a more emphatic version of 3, a blanket instruction to ignore things, which is an odd thing to put on a sign in a state park because it presumes there are things worth ignoring. I unlocked the display case with my key. The sign was pinned with standard push pins, the same kind we used at the station. The cardstock was the same weight and finish as the stock we kept in the supply closet. The formatting was clean, consistent with park service templates, though it didn't have the state park logo or the standard footer with the website and emergency number. It looked almost official. Almost. I took it down, folded it carefully, and put it in my jacket pocket. When I got back to the station, I radioed Dale. It took him a while to respond, which wasn't unusual. When he did, I told him I'd found an unauthorized posting at the Black Rock kiosk. There was a pause. Then he asked me what it said. I told him. I read the rules off the cardstock, slowly, clearly. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was another pause, longer this time. Then he said, "Bring it in on Thursday." That was it. No alarm, no follow-up questions. No, "That's strange," or "Who would do that?" or "I'll send someone out." Just bring it in on Thursday. Thursday was 2 days away. I said, "Do you want me to file an incident report?" He said, "Not yet. Just bring it in." I brought it in on Thursday. I drove to the district office near Station 1 and handed it to Dale, who took it, looked at it briefly, and put it in a desk drawer. Not a file. A drawer. The same way you'd put away a takeout menu or a piece of junk mail. He thanked me and asked about trail conditions, and we talked about the upcoming prescribed burn schedule for 20 minutes, and he never mentioned the sign again. I went back to Station 3 and tried to let it go. I want to be clear about my state of mind at this point. I was not frightened. I was not suspicious of Dale. I was mildly annoyed, mostly because the sign had been well made and clearly placed by someone who had access to the display case, which meant either someone had a key they shouldn't have, or the case had been left unlocked, which would have been my fault. I assumed it was a prank, maybe a former employee with a grievance, maybe a local with too much time and a dark sense of humor. The weird rules, the knocking sounds, the warning about unfamiliar signs. It read like something from an internet horror story, the kind of thing people share on forums. I figured someone had printed it out and stuck it in the kiosk as a joke. I'd worked parks where visitors had left fake warning signs about Bigfoot and UFOs. It wasn't unprecedented. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, it was at the Ridgeline Overlook, a scenic pull-off about 4 miles up the main park road from my station. There was a small interpretive sign there, mounted on a metal post, explaining the geology of the valley. Beside it, attached with zip ties to the post, was a new laminated placard. Same white background, same clean black text, same format. This one was titled Phelps Ridge State Park. Overlook Guidelines. Ridgeline Point. The rules were different this time. Some were normal. Don't leave trash. Stay behind the railing. Some were not. One said, do not take photographs facing northwest between the hours of dusk and dawn. Another said, if the overlook appears occupied by other visitors, but no vehicles are present in the parking area, do not approach. Return to your vehicle and leave. Another said, if you experience a sudden feeling of being watched while standing at the railing, step back immediately and do not look down into the valley. I removed it. I put it in a plastic evidence bag from the station's supply kit, because this time I was treating it more seriously. I radioed Dale. Same response. Bring it in Thursday. I asked if he wanted me to check the security camera at the overlook parking lot. He said the camera had been offline since October. I asked if he'd reported the first sign to regional. He said he'd handle it. I brought the second sign in on Thursday. He put it in the same drawer. I drove back to Station 3 and sat in the office for a long time, not doing anything. I wasn't scared. I want to keep emphasizing that because the fear came later, and it came from a different direction than you'd expect. At that point, I was just confused. 2 signs, 2 weeks apart, both inside secured display areas or attached to park infrastructure, both formatted to look official, both containing a mix of normal and deeply abnormal instructions. Someone was doing this deliberately, with access and materials and knowledge of the park, and my supervisor's response was to put them in a drawer. I decided to check the other trailhead kiosks in my section. There were 4 total, including Black Rock. I drove to each one over the course of the next morning. 2 were clean. One, at the Hemlock Loop trailhead, had a new posting, same format, same style. Phelps Ridge State Park Trail Guidelines, Hemlock Loop. This one I read standing in the cold with my breath clouding the plexiglass. 1. Hemlock Loop is a 3.2-mile moderate trail. Allow approximately 2 hours for completion. 2. Do not step off the boardwalk section between mile markers 0.8 and 1.1. 3. The trail passes through a designated quiet zone between mile markers 1.4 and 1.9. Do not speak, whistle, sing, or make unnecessary noise in this area. 4. If you notice that the trail appears to loop back to a point you have already passed, continue forward. Do not turn around. 5. Hikers who become disoriented should sit down, close their eyes, and wait. Do not call out for help. A ranger will locate you. That last one sat in my chest like a stone. A ranger will locate you. I was the ranger. I was the only ranger in this section of the park, and I had not been briefed on any quiet zone, any designated area, any protocol for locating disoriented hikers through some means other than standard search procedure. The sign was speaking on my behalf, promising a response that I had not agreed to provide and did not understand. I took it down. I bagged it. I did not radio Dale this time. Instead, I drove directly to Station 2, where Lena worked. Lena Mosley was in her mid-40s, short, weathered, in the way that people who've spent decades outdoors get weathered. She had a calm, direct way of talking that I appreciated. She didn't waste words. I'd interacted with her mostly over the radio, brief morning check-ins, but I'd always found her competent and steady. I walked into Station 2 and put the 3 evidence bags on her counter. She looked at them without touching them. Then she looked at me. I said, "Have you seen anything like this at your kiosks?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the bags again. Then she said, "Sit down." I sat. She said, "How many have you found?" I said 3. She asked where. I told her. She asked if I'd told Dale. I said yes, for the first two. She nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something she already knew. Then she said, I've been finding them for 6 years. I didn't say anything. I waited. She told me that the first one she'd found was in 2016, posted at the Lake Loop trailhead near her station. Same format, same mix of normal and abnormal rules. She'd reported it to Dale, who had been district ranger for about 2 years at that point. He'd told her to take it down and bring it in. She'd asked questions. He'd given her the same non-answers he'd given me. She'd pushed harder than I had. She'd filed a formal incident report. The report had been accepted, processed, and then, about a month later, she'd gone to pull it up in the system, and it was gone. Not rejected, not archived, gone. No record of it. When she asked Dale about it, he said he'd look into it. He never mentioned it again. She said the signs kept appearing, not on a regular schedule. Sometimes weeks apart, sometimes months. Always at trailhead kiosks or information posts. Always formatted the same way. Always containing a mix of standard park guidance and rules that made no sense, or made a kind of sense that was worse than nonsense. She'd collected over 30 of them before she stopped counting. I asked her what she did with them now. She said, I take them down and put them in the filing cabinet in the back room. I don't report them anymore. I asked her why. She said, and I remember this clearly because of how plainly she said it, because reporting them doesn't do anything, and the more attention you give them, the more they show up. I asked her what she meant by that. She shook her head. Not a refusal. More like she didn't know how to explain it in a way that would make sense. She said that in the years she'd been tracking them, she'd noticed that the signs appeared more frequently in areas she spent more time in. When she started checking a particular kiosk more often, that kiosk would have new postings more often. When she stopped checking, they slowed down. She couldn't prove this. She hadn't done any kind of rigorous analysis. It was a feeling, she said, but it was a consistent feeling. I asked her the question that had been building in my chest since I'd read the first sign. I asked, who's putting them up? She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, I don't know. Nobody does. The kiosks are locked. I have a key. You have a key. Dale has a key. Maintenance has a key. That's it. I've changed my lock twice. They still get in. I've staked out a kiosk overnight, sat in my truck 50 yards away with binoculars, watched the thing from midnight to dawn. Nothing. Nobody comes. And in the morning, there's a new sign inside the case. I felt something then. Not fear. Not exactly. More like the feeling of stepping off a curb you didn't know was there. A sudden drop that you recover from immediately, but that changes the way you walk for the rest of the block. I asked Lena if she'd ever followed any of the rules, not the normal ones, the strange ones. She didn't answer right away. She got up and poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot on the counter, even though it looked like it had been sitting there for hours. She drank some. Then she said, I followed one once, about 4 years ago. There was a sign at the dam overlook that said, if you hear a voice calling your name from the water after dark, do not respond, but walk to the eastern shore and leave a light on at the picnic shelter. I was working late one night, and I heard something from the lake. It wasn't my name. It was just a sound. But it was directed, like it was aimed. I went to the picnic shelter and turned on the light, and the sound stopped. She paused. I don't know what that means. I don't know if the light did anything or if the sound would have stopped anyway. I'm telling you this because you asked, not because I think it proves something. I asked if the rules were ever wrong, if anyone had gotten hurt following them or ignoring them. She said she didn't know. She said the park had a low incident rate. Occasionally a hiker would get turned around on the Hemlock Loop, which was known for being confusing even before the signs started, and search and rescue would bring them out. Once, a few years back, a solo camper at one of the backcountry sites on the eastern ridge had packed up and hiked out in the middle of the night, leaving all his gear behind. He'd walked to the front gate and sat on the ground and waited for it to open at dawn. When Garza found him, the man didn't want to talk about what happened. He just wanted his car keys, which were still at the campsite. Garza drove in and got them. The man left and never came back and never filed a complaint. I asked Lena if she thought the signs were connected to incidents like that. She said she didn't know. She said she'd stopped trying to build a theory. She said building a theory required treating the signs as evidence of something, and she'd found that treating them as evidence of something made things worse, though she couldn't explain what worse meant specifically. It was a feeling. Everything about this was a feeling. I drove back to Station 3 that evening. The sun was going down, and the road through the park was empty and winding, and the trees were bare, and the sky was the color of old iron. I parked at the station and went inside and locked the door and sat at my desk and looked at the bulletin board on the wall. There was a new piece of paper pinned to it. It was not there when I left that morning. I was certain of this. I had walked past that board on my way out. I would have noticed. It was the same format, same cardstock, same clean black text, but this one was not a trail sign. It was titled Station 3, Internal Guidelines, Ranger Personnel. And it was addressed to me, not by name, but by position. It was a set of rules for the ranger assigned to Station 3, and it was posted inside my station, inside a locked building on my bulletin board. I stood in front of it and read it. And I'm going to tell you what it said because I think you need to hear it the way I heard it. Standing in that cold office with the wood stove not yet lit and the last gray light coming through the window. 1. Maintain all trailhead kiosks and information posts in your section. Remove unauthorized postings promptly. 2. Do not attempt to determine the origin of unauthorized postings. 3. Log all removed postings in the station's incident file. Do not transmit descriptions of posting content over radio. 4. If a posting references a specific trail, location, or feature in your section, visually inspect that location within 24 hours. Do not bring equipment, companions, or recording devices. 5. Do not discuss posting content with visitors, volunteers, or non-essential personnel. 6. If you experience discomfort, confusion, or disorientation while reading a posting, stop reading immediately and remove it without finishing. File it without reviewing it further. 7. Trust the system. The system is older than your assignment. I read it twice. Then I took it down. I folded it and put it in my desk drawer, which I realize now was exactly what Dale did. The same gesture. The same quiet filing of something that couldn't be explained and wouldn't be discussed. I did not radio Dale. I did not drive to Lena's station. I went outside, split some kindling, lit the wood stove, made dinner, and sat in the orange light of the fire and ate canned chili and crackers and did not think about what I had read. That's not true. I thought about it constantly, but I thought about it the way you think about something you're not supposed to think about, which is sideways, at an angle, never directly. I circled the edges of it without touching the center. I thought about the cardstock, the push pins, the formatting. I thought about the locked door and the undisturbed windows. I thought about Rule 7. Trust the system. The system is older than your assignment. I turned that sentence over in my mind like a coin. examining each face without ever looking at what was underneath. I did not sleep well that night, not because I was afraid, because my mind would not stop moving. In the morning, I made coffee and checked the radio. Lena's voice came through for the morning check-in. She said, "Good morning." I said, "Good morning." She asked about conditions. I said the roads were clear. She said the same. And then, after a pause that lasted just a beat too long, she said, "Anything new at the station?" I knew what she was asking. I knew she wasn't asking about the weather or the propane level or the trail conditions. She was asking if I'd found one. And the fact that she was asking meant she expected me to find one. And the fact that she expected it meant this had happened before. Maybe to her. Maybe to whoever had Station 3 before me. I said, "Nothing to report." She said, "Copy." And that was the moment, I think, when I crossed a line that I didn't know was there. Because I had just lied on a radio channel. I had just said nothing to report when there was something to report. And I hadn't done it because I was scared or because someone told me to. I'd done it because it felt correct. It felt like the appropriate response. It felt like the thing the system wanted me to say. And I realized, standing there with the radio mic in my hand, that I had already started following the rules on the sign that I hadn't put up, the sign that no one had put up, the sign that had appeared inside my locked station while I was gone. Rule 5 said, "Don't discuss posting content with non-essential personnel." I had obeyed it without deciding to. It had just happened. I want to stop here and tell you that I know how this sounds. I know it sounds like I am describing some kind of mind control or supernatural influence. I'm not. What I'm describing is much simpler and much worse. I'm describing how quickly a person adapts to an institutional framework, even an irrational one, when that framework is the only structure available. I was alone. I was 9 miles from the nearest paved road. My supervisor gave me no answers. My one colleague gave me no explanations. The only entity communicating clearly with me, providing specific instructions, acknowledging my role, and defining my responsibilities, was whatever was producing these signs. And the signs were consistent. They were well organized. They followed a format. They made rules, and the rules, if you didn't think too hard about what they implied, were followable. I could do what they said. I could remove postings. I could inspect locations. I could file without reviewing. I could refrain from discussing. These were actionable steps. They were tasks. And I was a person who functioned well with tasks. Over the next several months, I settled into a version of my job that included the signs as a regular feature. They kept appearing, not every day. Sometimes a week would pass with nothing. Sometimes I'd find 3 in a single morning, 1 at each kiosk. The content varied. Some were clearly meant for the public, trail rules and warnings and guidelines that mixed the mundane with the deeply strange. Some were more specific, referencing particular campsites, trail junctions, or features by their exact location. A few were seasonal. One appeared in early March that listed rules for the spring thaw period, including a rule that said, "If meltwater on the trail appears to flow uphill, do not follow it. Continue on the marked path and report the location to the station." I never saw meltwater flow uphill. I checked because Rule 4 on the station sign told me to inspect locations referenced in postings. I hiked to every spot mentioned in every sign. I did it alone, without equipment or recording devices, just as the rule instructed. I stood at mile marker 2.4 on the Black Rock Trail and looked at the overgrown spur trail and saw nothing unusual, just a narrow dirt path disappearing into rhododendron. I stood at the ridgeline overlook at dusk and faced northwest and felt nothing. saw nothing, heard nothing. I walked the quiet zone on Hemlock Loop and was, indeed, quiet, though I told myself this was just because I was alone and there was no one to talk to. Nothing happened. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Nothing happened. I followed the rules, or most of them, and nothing happened. No incidents, no encounters, no unexplained events. The forest was the same forest it had always been. The trails were the same trails. The only anomaly was the signs themselves, and the signs were just paper and ink and pushpins. They were physical objects that could be touched and removed and filed. They were not, in themselves, dangerous. They were instructions, and following instructions was my job. But the content of the signs evolved. I don't know if that's the right word. They didn't become more extreme or more frightening. They became more specific, more personal. Not in the sense that they addressed me by name, but in the sense that they referenced things that only I would know. One sign, posted at the Black Rock kiosk in late April, included a rule that said, if you find a trail register entry dated before the park's opening year, 1974, do not read the entry. Remove the page and file it at the station. I had found exactly such an entry 2 days earlier. A handwritten note in the Black Rock Trail Register, dated 1961, 13 years before the park existed. I had puzzled over it and ultimately decided it was a prank or a mistake, someone writing the wrong year. I hadn't told anyone about it. Another sign, posted at the station itself, included a new rule. Do not review filed postings. Filed material should be stored face down in the incident cabinet. If a filed posting is found face up, turn it over without reading it. I had been rereading the old signs. I'd been taking them out of the filing cabinet at night and spreading them on the desk and looking at them together, trying to find patterns, trying to see if the rules referenced each other, trying to build the theory that Lena had warned me against building. And now there was a rule telling me to stop. A rule that could only exist if whoever, whatever, was producing the signs knew what I was doing in the privacy of my own station at night. I turned the filed signs face down. I stopped reviewing them, not because I believed I was being watched, not because I was afraid of consequences, because the rule was there, and following the rule was easier than not following it. And the thing that happened in my mind when I followed the rules was a kind of quiet that I had come to need. The quiet of compliance, the peace of not asking. I want to describe what that peace feels like, because I think it's important, and I think it's the thing that people won't understand from the outside. It feels like setting down a weight you didn't know you were carrying. You've been walking around with this low-grade tension, this constant background hum of questions and doubts and analyses, and then you just stop. You accept that the system is what it is. You do what it says. And the hum goes silent, and in the silence, you can hear the birds again. You can feel the sun on your face. You can do your job without the grinding distraction of trying to understand something that refuses to be understood. It's not happiness. It's not contentment. It's relief. And relief, when you've been confused for long enough, feels almost identical to peace. Dale retired at the end of that summer, quietly, no ceremony, no party. He drove to Station 3 on his last day and sat on my porch and drank coffee and looked at the trees. I thought he might finally say something about the signs, acknowledge them, explain them, give me some kind of parting wisdom. He didn't. We talked about the fall burn schedule and the new maintenance hire, and whether the repeater on Kilmer Knob would make it through another winter. When he stood up to leave, he shook my hand and said, "You're doing fine out here. Keep doing what you're doing." And then he paused and said, "Don't let it become more than it is." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The job. Don't make it more than it is. It's maintenance and observation. That's all." He left. A new district ranger was assigned, a younger woman named Tran, who worked mostly from the regional office and visited the park about once a month. She was efficient and professional and had no apparent interest in Station 3 beyond confirming that my reports were filed on time. I never mentioned the signs to her. The signs never told me to, and by that point my behavior was guided as much by what the signs didn't say as by what they did. Lena and I developed a routine. We didn't talk about the signs on the radio. We never talked about them on the radio. But about once a month, I'd drive to Station 2, and we'd sit in her office and drink bad coffee and compare notes, though compare notes is too structured a description. It was more like two people acknowledging a shared condition without trying to diagnose it. She'd say, "Anything at Hemlock?" And I'd say, "2 this month," and she'd nod and say, "I had 3 at the lake," and that would be it. We didn't discuss the content. We didn't share theories. We just confirmed for each other that it was still happening and that we were both still here, still working, still functional. I asked her once, during one of these visits, if she'd ever considered quitting. She looked at me like I'd asked if she'd ever considered breathing underwater. Not offended, just surprised by the impracticality of the question. She said, "And go where? Do what? This is what I do. This is where I am. The signs are part of the park, and I'm part of the park." I understood exactly what she meant. That's the thing. I understood it completely. There was one more incident I need to tell you about, and then I'll try to explain where I am now. It was October of last year, peak color season. The park was busier than usual, and I was spending long days at the trailheads, managing parking, answering questions, the normal seasonal rush. I was at the Black Rock kiosk one afternoon, restocking maps, when a family came off the trail. Mom, Dad, 2 kids, maybe 8 and 10, the usual setup, hiking boots, day packs, water bottles. The dad was carrying a folded piece of paper. He walked up to me and said, "Hey, I wanted to ask about the rules sign at the junction." I felt something cold move through my stomach. "What sign?" He unfolded the paper. It was a posting. Same format, same cardstock. He'd taken it off a trail marker at the junction where the Black Rock Trail split into the upper and lower loop. He handed it to me. I looked at it. It had 5 rules. The first 3 were normal. The 4th said, "If your group becomes separated on the upper loop, do not call out to locate each other. Proceed to the trailhead independently. All members will arrive." The 5th said, "Children under 12 should not look directly at the rock formation at mile marker 3.1. An adult should guide them past with their eyes directed at the ground." The dad was smiling, but not comfortably. He said, "Is this like a park thing, like a scare trail or something for Halloween?" I took the paper from him. I said, "No, this isn't an official posting. Someone's been putting up unauthorized signs. I appreciate you bringing it to me." The words came out smooth and practiced. I'd never rehearsed them. They were just there, ready, like they'd been waiting. He said, "Some of those rules were pretty specific. The one about kids and the rock, my daughter was asking about it. She wanted to know what was wrong with the rock." I said, "There's nothing wrong with the rock. It's just a prank. I'll file a report and we'll have it looked into." He thanked me and left. His daughter, the younger one, looked back at me as they walked to their car. She had that expression kids get when they know an adult is lying, but haven't yet learned to pretend they don't notice. I stood there holding the sign after they drove away. I read it again. All members will arrive. Not all members will be fine. Or, all members should regroup. All members will arrive. As if arrival were guaranteed by something other than the hiker's own effort. As if the trail itself would deliver them. I filed the sign face down in the cabinet without reading it again. That night I sat in the station, and the wood stove was going, and the forest was quiet, and I realized that I had lied to that family without hesitation. Not just a small lie, a structural lie. I had told them it was a prank when I knew it wasn't. I had told them there was nothing wrong with the rock when I had no idea whether that was true. I had told them I'd file a report when I knew the report would go nowhere, and I had done it all calmly, professionally, fluently, because that was what the system required. The system required that visitors not be alarmed. The system required that the signs be removed and filed and not discussed. The system required that the ranger maintain order and normalcy and the appearance of control. And I had done it. I had performed my function within the system exactly as the signs, the very signs I was dismissing as pranks, had instructed me to. I sat with that for a long time. I'm still sitting with it, in a sense. It's spring again now. The dogwoods are blooming along the lower trails. The creek is high from the snowmelt. I checked the Hemlock Loop kiosk this morning and found a new posting. 2 pages, this time, front and back, laminated. I didn't read beyond the first 3 rules. One of them referenced a specific campsite that I approved for reservation last week. Another referenced weather conditions that were forecasted but hadn't occurred yet. I removed the sign. I filed it face down. I logged the removal in the incident file with the date and location, and the notation, unauthorized posting, removed and secured. I did not describe the content. I haven't described the content in my logs for over a year now. The logs just show a steady, regular series of removals, dates and locations, nothing more. If someone pulled the file, they'd see a pattern of vandalism and a ranger who diligently addressed it. They would not see what the signs said. They would not see that the signs were accurate. They would not see that the ranger was following them. I don't know what the signs are. I don't know who makes them, or how they get into locked cases, or why they know things they shouldn't know. I don't know if the rules protect people or control them, or if there's even a difference. I don't know if the system is benevolent or predatory or just indifferent. A process running on its own logic, maintaining itself the way the forest maintains itself, without motive or mercy or meaning. I know that I remove the signs and I file them, and I inspect the locations, and I follow the rules, and I do not discuss the content, and I do not review the files, and I trust the system. I know that the park runs smoothly. Incident rates are low. Visitors are satisfied. The trails are maintained. The kiosks are clean. My performance reviews are good. I'm doing fine out here. Everyone says so. Lena and I don't compare notes anymore. We stopped about 6 months ago, by mutual, unspoken agreement. I think we both realized that talking about it, even in our careful, oblique way, was a form of analysis. And analysis is not part of the procedure. The procedure is removal, filing, inspection, silence. The procedure is the job, and the job is the procedure. And I'm part of the park, and the park is the system, and the system is older than my assignment. I go to bed at 10 most nights. I set my alarm for 5:30. I eat oatmeal and drink black coffee, and I check the radio, and I drive the roads, and I walk the trails, and I open the kiosks, and sometimes there is a new sign, and sometimes there isn't, and when there is, I take it down, and I fold it, and I put it in the cabinet, face down, and I go about my day. This morning, there was one at the station, pinned to the bulletin board. like the first one I found there. I saw it when I came out of the bedroom. It was short this time, just 2 lines. 1. Continue current duties as assigned. 2. Thank you. I read it. I took it down. I filed it. I made my coffee. I checked the radio. Lena said good morning. I said good morning. She asked about conditions. I said the roads were clear. She said, anything new at the station? I said, nothing to report. She said, copy. I drove out to the Black Rock trailhead to start my rounds. The sun was coming through the trees in long, clean lines. A woodpecker was working somewhere uphill. The air smelled like mud and new leaves and something else, something I don't have a word for. Something that's been there since before the park, since before the trails, since before anyone thought to write rules on cardstock and pin them where people could find them. I unlocked the kiosk. It was clean, nothing new. I stood there for a moment, looking at the empty display case, and I felt something. Not relief, not fear, something in between. Something like the feeling you get when you realize you've been holding your breath and you don't remember when you started. I locked the kiosk. I got in my truck. I drove to the next trailhead. The roads were clear. The trails were maintained. The signs were filed. The system was stable. Nothing to report.